I ran away from my family 10 years ago, escaping the suffocating grip of their wealth and a dark ritual they call the harvest. I built a new life, a simple life, far away from their remote New England estate. But when my younger brother announced his wedding, my mother summoned me home. She said it was for a reconciliation, but I knew better. Now I'm back, and I've discovered the horrifying truth. The wedding is a sham. It's a ceremony to prepare the next sacrifice, and they've decided it's me. To uncover the sinister revenge I planned, you have to hear this story to the end. It's the only way you'll believe it. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a credit card offer and a utility bill. It was thick, creamy cardstock, the kind that feels heavy with the weight of unspoken obligations. The return address was a place I hadn't allowed myself to think about in a decade, Blackwell Manor, Vermont. My stomach twisted. It wasn't a request, it was a summons. My younger brother, Caleb, was getting married. And I, the family's prodigal son and resident ghost, was being called home. My name is Ethan. For the last 10 years, my life has been deliberately, aggressively normal. I live in a third-floor walk-up in Denver, Colorado. I work as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm. I drink cheap coffee, I hike on the weekends, and I pay my rent on time. My life is small and quiet, and most importantly, mine. It's a world away from the echoing halls and sprawling, manicured grounds of the Blackwell estate. A place where the air is thick with the scent of old money, and even older secrets. The biggest secret, the one that made me run, is a tradition they call the harvest. To an outsider it sounds noble, almost biblical. Every generation, one member of the Blackwell family is chosen to make a great sacrifice for the good of the whole. They forsake their personal ambitions, their careers, their own lives, to manage the family's vast, complicated fortune. They become the steward, the caretaker, the martyr. The family praises them, honors them, builds them up as a hero. But it's a gilded cage. You don't just manage the money manages you. You are consumed by it, tethered to the estate forever. Your life's purpose reduced to signing checks and preserving a legacy built on the bones of other people's dreams. My great-uncle was the last harvest. He was a brilliant artist before he was chosen. I only remember him as a gray, hollowed-out man who smelled of scotch and spent his days staring out the library window. I knew, from the moment I was born, that I was a candidate. I was the eldest, but I refused. The night of my 21st birthday, my mother, Eleanor, sat me down in the very same library. She told me the honor was mine. I told her to go to hell. I packed a bag that night and disappeared. I didn't just leave. I performed an exorcism on myself. I cut off all contact, changed my number, and never looked back, until now. Caleb, my sweet, pliable younger brother, was getting married to a woman named Amelia. The wedding was my mother's leverage. She knew I still loved Caleb, despite everything. She knew I wouldn't let him get married without his big brother there. It was the perfect trap. Against every screaming instinct in my body, I booked a flight. Driving up the long, winding gravel path to Blackwell Manor was like entering a time warp. The ancient oaks still draped the lane in a perpetual twilight. The house itself loomed at the top of the hill, a Gothic monstrosity of gray stone and dark windows, looking less like a home and more like a mausoleum. My mother met me at the door. Eleanor Blackwell is a masterpiece of controlled elegance. Not a single silver hair is ever out of place. Her smile never quite reaches her cold, calculating eyes. She greeted me not with a hug but with a critical once-over. "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth as polished marble, "you look healthy." "The city agrees with you." It wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation, a subtle reminder that I had abandoned my proper place. "It's good to see you too, Mother," I said, my voice tight. The house was exactly as I remembered it, oppressively quiet, filled with antique furniture that no one ever sat on. Caleb found me in the hall. He looked older, more careworn than I expected. The easy smile he used to have was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. "You came," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt more desperate than welcoming. "I can't believe you actually came." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I lied. He introduced me to his fiancée, Amelia. She was bright and bubbly, and so painfully out of place in that house, it was like watching a songbird in a snake pit. She was clearly in love with Caleb, and just as clearly intimidated by my mother. She kept glancing at Eleanor for approval, her smile faltering whenever my mother's gaze landed on her. She was perfect for them. She was manageable. For the first 2 days they played their parts beautifully. We had stilted family dinners where my mother would regale Amelia with stories of the Blackwell legacy. She spoke of the harvest in hushed, reverent tones, framing it as the ultimate act of love. "It is the bedrock of this family," she said one night, fixing her gaze on me. "A promise that we will always put the family before ourselves." Some find that promise difficult to keep. The gaslighting was so effortless for her. She was recasting my escape not as an act of self-preservation, but as a selfish betrayal. I could feel the old helplessness creeping back in, the feeling of being a teenager trapped in her web. Caleb just sat there, staring at his plate, a perfect model of learned helplessness. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was a willing participant in my character assassination. It was in that moment I realized the profound depth of his bond to her, a twisted thing born of fear and a desperate need for her conditional love. The other shoe dropped on the third night. My mother requested my presence in the library, the family's execution chamber. "The wedding is in 3 days, she began, getting straight to the point. "And there are some formalities." She slid a thick leather-bound portfolio across the polished mahogany desk. "As you know, the family trust is renegotiated with each new generation, each new marriage. It requires a unanimous signature from all primary heirs." I opened the portfolio. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a standard trust document, it was a transfer of assets, my assets. The inheritance my grandfather had left me directly, the one thing she could never touch, was to be absorbed into the main Blackwell family trust. And there was another clause, one that made me feel like I couldn't breathe. It stipulated that in the event of Caleb being unable to fulfill his duties, the responsibility of stewardship would fall to the next in line. "Me? What is this?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "It's a reunification, darling," she said, her voice laced with triumph. "Caleb and Amelia are starting their life together. They need the full backing of the family, your contribution. It's your way of finally doing your part, of blessing this union." I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the cold reptilian gleam in her eyes. The wedding wasn't just a wedding, it was a transaction. They were using Caleb's marriage to Amelia to legally bind me back to the family, to make me the fail-safe for the next harvest. They weren't just asking for my money, they were asking for my life, my soul, on an installment plan. "And Caleb agreed to this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Caleb understands the importance of tradition," she said coolly. "He understands that the family is more important than any one person's selfish desires." "It's a shame you never learned that lesson." I stood there, feeling the walls of the library close in on me. I had walked right back into the lion's den, and the cage door had just slammed shut. My mother smiled, a thin, cruel line. She thought she had won. She thought I was the same scared boy who had run away 10 years ago. She had no idea who I'd become. She had no idea that you don't spend a decade fighting to build a life from scratch without learning how to burn things to the ground. She wanted a sacrifice. Fine, I would give her one. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. For a full day, I let them believe they had me. I was quiet, withdrawn, playing the part of the defeated son. I saw the smug satisfaction in my mother's eyes, the pathetic mix of guilt and relief on Caleb's face. They thought my silence was submission. It wasn't. It was the calm before a hurricane. My anger wasn't hot anymore, it was a cold, sharp, and focused thing. I wasn't just going to refuse to sign. I was going to dismantle the entire corrupt system of the harvest. And I was going to use my mother's own obsession with tradition to do it. That night, I broke into the library. My father, before he passed, had been a quiet rebel. He'd told me stories of secret compartments and hidden ledgers, the real history of the Blackwells that wasn't fit for public consumption. I spent hours running my hands along the ornate woodwork, pressing on panels, searching for the hollow sound he'd described. Finally, behind a row of leather-bound first editions, a section of the bookshelf clicked inward. Inside was a small, dusty alcove, and in it a set of old, faded ledgers. They weren't financial records, they were journals. Journals kept by every Blackwell who had been chosen for the harvest. I started with my great-uncle, the artist. His early entries were full of hope. He wrote about the honor and his duty. But as the years went on, the entries became darker. He wrote about the crushing weight of responsibility, the slow death of his creative spirit. He described my grandmother, Eleanor's mother, as a vulture in pearls, a woman who used the tradition to wield absolute power. Then I found the entry that changed everything. He wrote about a loophole, a forgotten codicil in the original Blackwell family charter from the 1800s. The charter stated that the harvest sacrifice must be whole and willing, and their assets given freely and without coercion for the prosperity of the bloodline. But it also stated that if the chosen steward was found to have been unduly influenced or their life's work unjustly seized, the power of stewardship would not just revert, but the entire trust would be frozen, pending an audit by an outside arbiter. It was a safety valve, designed by the original Blackwells to prevent a tyrant from taking over. A safety valve that had been conveniently forgotten for a century. And then, I found the final piece of my arsenal. Tucked into the back of the last journal was a sheaf of letters. They were love letters, written by my mother, Eleanor, 50 years ago. They weren't to my father. They were to a man she'd loved before him, a man with no money and no status. A man her mother, the vulture in pearls, had forced her to give up. The letters were full of rage and despair. She wrote about being forced into a marriage with my father to secure a business merger. She wrote about how her own mother had harvested her future for the good of the family. My God, my mother wasn't just a monster. She was a monster that had been created by this very tradition. She wasn't just a perpetrator. She was a victim who had become her own abuser, perpetuating the same cycle of pain that had destroyed her. It didn't excuse her actions, but it explained them. It was her motive, her origin story, and it was the key to my revenge. A revenge that wouldn't just be about justice, it would be about mercy. The day of the wedding arrived. The ceremony was a blur of white lace and hushed whispers on the great lawn. Amelia looked beautiful and terrified. Caleb looked like a man walking to his own execution. My mother presided over it all, a queen in her kingdom. The reception was held in the grand ballroom. After the dinner, my mother stood, tapping a glass for silence. And now, she announced, her voice resonating through the cavernous room, we have a very special part of our celebration. A moment to reaffirm the values that have kept this family strong for generations. My eldest son, Ethan, has returned to us, and he wishes to say a few words to bless this union and do his part to welcome Amelia into the family. All eyes turned to me. A waiter brought the leather portfolio and a pen to my table. This was it. The moment of my public execution or my liberation. I walked to the front of the room, taking the microphone. I looked at my mother, whose face was a mask of smug victory. I looked at Caleb, who wouldn't meet my gaze. I looked at Amelia, whose eyes were pleading with me to just sign the papers and end the tension. Thank you, Mother, I began, my voice steady. It's true, I have returned. And I understand now more than ever the importance of tradition. I understand the importance of the harvest. My mother's smile widened. Caleb sagged in relief. The harvest is about sacrifice, I continued, my voice growing stronger. It's about giving up your own ambition for the good of the family. I have here, I said, holding up the portfolio, the papers that would complete my sacrifice, my contribution to the family, my blessing. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. But I've been reading about our family's history, and I've learned that the most important part of the harvest isn't the sacrifice itself. It's that the sacrifice must be willing. It must be given freely without coercion. I turned my gaze directly to my mother. I saw the first flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, and so I cannot sign these papers. Because this is not a willing sacrifice. This is an extortion. The room erupted in gasps. My mother's face went white. Ethan, that's enough, she hissed. No, I said firmly, my voice booming through the microphone. It's not enough. For generations we have called this tradition an honor, when it is in fact a prison. We have allowed the steward of this family to become a warden. We have allowed them to seize the lives and futures of their children and call it love. I pulled the bundle of my mother's old love letters from my jacket pocket. I found these, I said softly, looking only at her now. I know what was done to you. I know that your mother harvested your future, just as you are trying to harvest Caleb's, and mine. Eleanor looked like I had physically struck her. The mask of the matriarch shattered, and for a fleeting second, I saw the heartbroken young woman from the letters. I turned to Caleb. Caleb, this isn't a marriage. It's a business deal, and your happiness is the price. Look at Amelia. Is this what you want for her? Is this what you want for yourself? A life in a gilded cage just like Great Uncle Robert? Or do you want a real life, one that you choose? Tears were streaming down Caleb's face. He looked at Amelia, then at our mother. And for the first time in his life, the fear in his eyes was replaced by a spark of defiance. I have the original family charter, I announced to the room, and it is very clear. If a steward is found to have used undue influence, the trust is frozen. And I consider $500,000 inheritance as the price for a wedding invitation to be undue influence. I ripped the signature page from the portfolio in my hands, tearing it into pieces and letting them flutter to the floor. "A harvest is over," I declared. Chaos. My mother stood, speechless and shaking, utterly defeated. Her power wasn't in money, it was in the illusion of tradition, and I had just shattered it. Caleb stood up, took Amelia by the hand, and walked straight out of the ballroom without looking back. I left them all there in the wreckage of their own making. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a profound, aching sadness for the decades of wasted lives. I walked out of that house and didn't stop until I was back at the airport. Caleb called me a week later. He and Amelia had eloped. He was terrified, but also for the first time he sounded free. He thanked me. He said I had given him his life back. We're talking again, really talking, for the first time since we were kids. The Blackwell Trust is frozen, tangled in a legal battle that will likely last for years. My mother, I'm told, is a recluse in that big, empty house. I didn't destroy her with hatred. I disarmed her with the truth, my own truth, and hers. I'm back in Denver now. My life is still quiet, still small, but it's no longer a refuge, it's a victory. I learned that you don't break a cycle of abuse by running from it. You break it by facing it, by understanding it, and by refusing to make the same sacrifices that they did. You offer a different choice. And in doing so, you don't just save yourself. You might just save them too.